All right, we can get started. Good to see everybody. Welcome to the 0 to 5 years class. The newborns and toddlers of marriage in here together. So we're excited to be with you all. I'm glad you found your way up here through all the different buildings and staircases and all that. So we're Rob and Chelsea Novack, and we got married 12 years ago, but we love the first 5 years of marriage and the last 7 years of marriage as well. But we love also, we've worked with a lot of college and young adult ministry, and so kind of that leading up to marriage and newlywed stage is one of our favorite parts of life to get to do with people, because it's new, it's exciting, it's also challenging and confusing, and there's a whole lot of stuff that goes on, but it's all good. And so if there's a title I wanted to give for this class, it would be Laying a Strong Foundation. That these first 5 years, really what you're doing is you're building the foundation for the rest of your life together. However long that's going to be, is that you want the rest of those years to be built on a strong foundation of your marriage. And of course you started building that foundation while you were single, when you started dating, when you got engaged, but really kind of in those first few years of marriage, you're still building that foundation of how do we work together. And, as, disciples dating and stuff like that too, there's a whole lot that's new after you get married with living together and figuring out a whole lot of things that are new. And so it really is such an exciting but important time of building the foundation of your marriage. And you want to build a strong foundation, because life is not easy. Life gets hectic. Your life takes hits. Your marriage takes hits. There's a lot of different things that go on. And you want to make sure you've built a strong foundation that's ready for all the stuff that comes with life. And so we want to talk a little bit about 3 different things that we think it's important to focus on to build a strong foundation for your marriage. Amen? Does that sound good?
Yes, sir.
I do want to say that, this isn't kind of a point, but it's maybe just a preface to all of these points, is that the most important thing in your marriage is that you both are staying spiritually focused individually and together. And that the context of all the other 3 points that we're going to make here is in a marriage where Jesus is Lord, where you're seeking to please God in your marriage. And so I'm just kind of starting off saying that that's the assumed foundation behind all these other things. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. That you're in a marriage where you're keeping God first. I know when we said our vows to each other, one of the things I said to Chelsea was I promise to always love God even more than I love you. And she said that back to me. And that's not lowering her, that actually helps me to love her and her to love me even better, is that we keep God first in our lives. You want to say anything? Cool. So the first of 3, and I'm going to have all of them start with the letter L, because we're laying a strong foundation. So the first one is living it up. Living it up. Life to the full together. And I do think that it's so important in your marriage that you have fun together. That you're friends. That you enjoy being together. That this is like your favorite person to be with. And that you're not so busy with everything else in life that you stop having fun together. Right? You want to live it up together, be living life to the full. I want to read a few different scriptures. You can write down and read more later. This is in the NLT version, Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verses 7 to 10. It says, "So go ahead, eat your food with joy, and drink your wine with a happy heart. For God approves of this. Wear fine clothes with a splash of cologne. Live happily with the woman you love through all the meaningless days of life that God has given you under the sun. The wife God gives you is your reward for all your earthly toil. Whatever you do, do well." When you read anything in Ecclesiastes, you got to take it with a grain of salt, these lines, like, because everything's meaningless, And at the end of Ecclesiastes, as you know, the writer concludes that we need to honor and obey God, and that in that we find fulfillment and purpose in life. But throughout the rest of the book is a lot of wisdom and direction for, hey, look, there's a lot of difficulty and toil and work in life, and so make sure that you're enjoying it as it goes. Because there's going to be, and then, the next passage speaks to this too, there are going to be dark days. There's going to be hard days. There's a lot of wasted energy, wasted time. So make sure that you're enjoying your spouse. In chapter 11, verses 8 to 10, it says, when people live to be very old, let them rejoice in every day of life. Right? Rejoice in every day of life. But let them also remember that there will be many dark days. Everything still to come is meaningless. And then verse 9 here was kind of a theme scripture for me. I memorized a couple years ago. It says, young people, it's wonderful to be young. Enjoy every minute of it. So maybe think about newlyweds. It's great to be newlywed. Enjoy every minute of it. Do everything you want to do. Take it all in. But remember that you must give an account to God for everything you do. So refuse to worry and keep your body healthy. And again, you see this call to embrace and to enjoy and to live life to the full while keeping in mind what you do matters and you want to live wisely and use your time wisely. But in it is this great call that, hey, it's wonderful to be young. Enjoy every minute of it. Do what you want to do. Take it all in. Don't refuse to worry, be healthy, and these were all great things I knew I needed to focus on because life can be stressful. There are many dark days and difficult things that come you don't expect. And so as much as possible, it's deciding we're going to keep living life to the full, living it up together. The last two quick scriptures I'll read here. Proverbs 5:18 says, let your wife be a fountain of blessing for you. Rejoice in the wife of your youth. And so the call to husbands here is to rejoice in your wife, to really love, to find joy in your wife. And then in Song of Songs, verse 5:16, this is now the woman speaking about her to-be husband. And she says, his mouth is sweetness itself. He is desirable in every way. Such a woman of Jerusalem is my lover, my friend. And I love that, she calls her husband here my lover, but also my friend. Mm-hmm. And you see that God does want us to not just be husband and wife, but to be friends as well. And so just some quick practical things on this, but I hope that you're hearing in this that with all the heaviness and work and everything else that comes in life, your marriage should be a place where you're living as friends with rejoicing and a lot of living joyful life together. And so, you want to have this still dating vibe going on in your marriage, right? Where, okay, yes, now you're married, so you're not just dating, you don't live separately, you don't have the same boundaries, but you're still dating in the sense that you're still trying to keep it fresh, to win each other over, to lift each other up, to make things special and fun, and to plan things like that. That you're still having fun together, laughing together, making memories together. And, it's important to kind of keep a pulse on that part of your marriage. That you reflect and you ask each other, maybe, every month or so, you pause to go, hey, are we having fun together? Are we enjoying each other? Are we too busy that we're not having fun together? What new memories are we making? Can we make? And making sure that you're keeping that in front of you, because it's easy, because it's not on the to-do list, so to speak, right? There's so many things you got to take care of, and it can end up seeming as like the unnecessary thing to make sure you're having fun together, but it is necessary for a joyful, full marriage to be having those times together. And I do want to say that those things don't have to be expensive. Sometimes things we do are expensive, but it doesn't have to be expensive. I know when Chelsea and I first got married, we just had to find things like real close by near us that we like doing together, like walking to get an ice cream at Carvel and walking home together. That was not that expensive, There was this incredible Spanish restaurant right by our house that, at a certain hour of the day before they closed, meals were it would be like $4 each, and we'd come home with this huge dinner, basically, and just finding these affordable things that were like our routine fun, going out and doing things together. And, a lot of these first 5 years, what you're doing is establishing a culture and a rhythm in your marriage, right? What is the culture and rhythm? And you want refreshment together to be part of that culture and that rhythm in your marriage. And so talk with each other about what are ways that you could have day-to-day fun together. right? It might be making sure that you have dinner together and that you're not on your phones during that, but that you're talking with each other and talking about each other's days and funny things from the day and different things like that. Finding favorite restaurants nearby. For Chelsea and I, it was things that we liked doing together, like going for walks, going hiking. We both got into running together. We loved beach days, and so on some Saturdays we would just say, hey, let's just drive an hour to the beach and spend a day at the beach together. And figuring out fun day-to-day things that weren't hard to do. Saturday movie nights and things that were, hey, this isn't expensive, this isn't hard, but we both enjoy this and we can do this easily. I think one of the things Chelsea and I made a priority in those first 5 years, especially in terms of building a culture in our marriage, was building a happy home atmosphere. And we try to think about, hey, one day, we knew we were probably going to even bring kids into our home. And you're just thinking about, when you're living a full and busy life and you're out there in the world experiencing everything that's out there, what do we want when you come back through our apartment door? What should it feel like in here? And we wanted our home to be like a happy home atmosphere where, we encouraged each other. It was a safe and joyful place. We were going to express excitement to see each other, that our home was going to be a place of still surprising each other, of giving to each other, of a lot of connection and things like that. So that's a lot of the day-to-day stuff, and the last practical couple things I'll mention here before I give it over to Chelsea is we also realized it was important to establish in our rhythm some annual ways that we were going to have fun and connect together, like regular getaways and things like that. That once or twice a year we were going to find a weekend or 2 nights or whatever it was where we were going to take off and we were going to have 2 or 3 days just really focused on each other. And I know for us, when things were piling up or getting extra stressful and we knew, hey, next month or hey, into whatever, like just having something like that to look forward to brought a lot of excitement. We picked different places to go visit, get on Groupon, check out where's like a really cheap place to go stay for 2 nights. There's ways to do it that don't have to be super expensive, but figuring out how we can get away together. Maybe you want to do house swaps with somebody else if you can't afford to go, hey, how about we go stay at your house one weekend and you come stay at our house one weekend. Maybe you link up with people from New England and Providence and do, getaway house swaps with each other or something like that. Ask for Christmas from your family or whatever it is. Like, hey, could you help us get a hotel somewhere? Or just figuring out ways that you can get away with each other. And the other thing is, having fun with peers, with other people. And I think that was a really crucial part of those first 5 years is that we were bringing into our marriage close other newlywed friendships. That we had other young married couples who we did the beach days with, we did the movie nights with, we had over for dinner, we went out with, and having those like peer young disciple friendships around you, that you're having fun and laughing together, helps bond you even more, just like when you would go on group dates when you were dating maybe or whatever, but now doing that with other young married couples. And so, these are different ways that we've made sure to keep fun in our marriage.
Yeah, and with that, I think I loved our first few years of marriage, and I was so happy to be married, but there was definitely days where I was like, what just happened? Like, my life went from this to something completely different. And it really helps me to have peers and other people in my life who we could just talk frankly about marriage. And like, I could hear like, oh, you were crying for 2 hours last night too. Oh, good, it's not just me. Something's not wrong with me. Or, oh, like, you guys are bumping about this. Oh, good, we bump about that too. Like, it just kind of normalizes the craziness, because the reality is that those first 5 years they can be challenging. And I feel like ours were amazing. I don't have many complaints, but it's just you kind of can't get around that in marriage, that it's 2 people coming together as disciples with all their sin, trying to be better disciples for God. Like, that's complicated, And we're not roommates. Like, I had roommates before I got married, and we could just kind of do our own thing, and I didn't have to worry about, anything with necessarily, I didn't feel any sort of like responsibility for her, or like need to care for her, or, which sounds really bad, but you know what I mean. Like, it's just a different level of commitment when you're married. Like, we're not roommates, we're like united life partners. Like that's serious, and that can be hard to figure out. How do we bring both of our worlds together when we're so radically different? But I think that's why I love what Scott and Raisa were saying about having those conversations of what are our dreams, what's our vision for our marriage, because I do feel like that helped us in the beginning to remember, like, okay, right now we're just building our foundation, and we're building good habits. And so some of the things we decided we wanted to be habits in our marriage and kind of just foundation was like honesty. Like that was something where people have different convictions about that stuff or different beliefs. So like we decided we wanted to be like very honest with each other about struggles, about sin. Like we wanted there to be total transparency in our marriage. That was something really early on we started doing and started practicing, started getting help with. And another one for us was vulnerability. Like we wanted to be really real with each other. We wanted to kind of be good disciplers of each other, like able to help each other spiritually. And so we started practicing that really early. But the Boston church right now is doing the Path series, and in that series it talks about having non-negotiables. Like you as a Christian, what are some non-negotiables you have with God? Like I'm gonna keep doing this. This is non-negotiable in my faith because it helps me spiritually. I think those are really important in marriage. Like for us, we knew a non-negotiable was we need another couple we can talk to. Because for us, we had quite a few like consistent bumps. Like bumps that we thought it was over and then, oh, there it is again. And so like we needed someone to know about those bumps, someone to talk to about those bumps. But we had certain non-negotiables like that. We're going to be honest, we're going to be real with each other, we're going to help each other spiritually. And that's really my favorite part of marriage, is that I don't have to go through discipleship alone, but that I have someone his job by God, biblically, is to help me be more spiritual. I think that's awesome, because he's a spiritual man, and that's why I married him, because I trusted his spirituality. So the fact that he has to look out for me spiritually brings me so much security, and then there's been times where vice versa, where I could see Rob getting off, and I'm like, that's not, any other brother's job. I'm his wife, I'm his strong helper, his Ezra, I have to also make sure he's doing well spiritually. But I love that about marriage. And another non-negotiable we've added in with that is trying to have humility in our marriage, just kind of an open, where I can share with him something I notice in him, and he can share with me something he notices in me, and that's okay. That's not weird for us. That's not, walking on eggshells. And obviously you have to do it right, which you learn very quickly in the first 5 years of marriage. But that was something we kind of decided, we want to be helping each other spiritually, and so we, everything's allowed. There's no topic off boundary for each other. We want to be able to help each other spiritually.
Amen. I don't know how many of you remember planning your wedding and all that stuff, but it's like you're dating and having fun, and then you start planning a wedding, and it's like all these stressful conversations and things to figure out and all that stuff. Is that relatable? Do you remember some of that?
Yeah.
Right? And I know, when we're, in life with people who are engaged and planning their wedding, I think we're always saying, make sure you're still having fun together. Make sure you're not only planning your wedding. You're still going on dates. You're still enjoying this stage. And I think newlyweds, there's so much new stuff you're figuring out. Living together, how to communicate, work through all this stuff, help each other spiritually, 2 jobs, 2 lives, 2 all this stuff. And I think it's so important to make sure you're still dating, you're still having fun, you're still friends and enjoying each other throughout all the stuff going on in life. And so what we want to do is, before we go on to the second point here, is take a few minutes where you just talk with each other about this kind of first idea and this first point here. And so, just 2 or 3 minutes, talk with each other about what are you getting from this, what do you need from this, or maybe, share with each other, what do you like to do for fun together? What could you have in a regular week together that you do that would be fun and refreshing? Or things like that you could work into your rhythm. So let's just take 3 minutes and talk about that, and then we'll keep going. All right, let's bring it back together. So part of my hope in this too is that you would maybe start talking about something that later during free time you want to keep talking about, and having some good conversation about ways to put these things into practice. And so, this first part is about living life to the full together, making sure that you're keeping that friendship, that dating, that joy. alive and well in your marriage's foundation. And the second thing we want to focus on here is probably the heart and the core of a marriage, and that's love above all. That at the end of the day, what's most important is that you love one another. I do think that the first kind of bit of your marriage, those first few years of marriage, is when you're really going from like la la land to really, okay, we got to love each other. When you're dating, when you're engaged, it's kind of like it's new, it's exciting, you're not living together, you're not figuring out all of this stuff and life together, and so it's challenging sometimes, but it's a bit of infatuation as well. Then you get married and you move in together, and now it's like, I got to love this person, And why is that? Because it's such a time where there's a mixture of like high excitement, but also high conflict sometimes. You're building real trust now. Like, do I really trust this person? And I'm going to be with them the rest of my life. You're learning how to communicate. You're learning how to resolve conflict. You're seeing weaknesses in the other person that you never saw before. And so 1 Peter 4:8 applies for marriages. It says, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. And surely in our marriages, there will be a multitude of sins. We live with each other. We're going to be the worst of ourselves with each other sometimes. And the Bible says, above all, love each other deeply. Right? That above everything else you're dealing with, everything else going on in life that you're trying to figure out, that you're navigating, that you're annoyed by, that you're stuck on, above all, you love one another deeply. And I'm sure most of us know this, but love is not only or always just a feeling, right? Like, I feel love. Sometimes we do. But more than that, love love her, love him. In that sense, and this love one another deeply, it's more a verb. It's something you do, that you decide. Right? So love in this way, love one another deeply, it's an action, it's a devotion, it's listening, it's caring, it's serving, it's giving. It's commitment. That's what the Bible calls us to above all. Is what's going to help cover over all this other conflict and stuff you're dealing with is deciding we are going to love one another deeply. And that's something you've got to decide for your marriage, is that above all else, we love each other. Right? That at the end of the day, at the end of this conflict, at the end of this decision, we love one another. And that doesn't stop, that doesn't change, that gets deeper. Love each other deeply.
Yeah, we took a parenting class too before we were even dating, but as church staff, they wanted all the staff members to take this parenting class. And one of the things they talked about in that class was the best thing you can give your kids and do for your kids is having a strong marriage. And I definitely didn't understand that at the time. But now that we have 2 boys, 8 and 7, and like the second they see us starting to hug each other or be sweet to each other or kiss, they get so they're like it just makes them so happy and it makes them feel secure, which is, it's cool how God designed it that way, that like even in our families, the best thing we could do in raising a family together is having an awesome marriage.
Yeah.
And it's so important with whatever stage you're in. The 6 to 19 class, the 20 plus class, like marriage is still the key foundation no matter where you're at. But one of my favorite scriptures on marriage is in 1 Peter 3. And this is right after 1 Peter 2, obviously, which 1 Peter 2 talks about a lot of different things. It talks about different relationships, and there's a lot of talk about different relationships that this person needs to submit to this person, and this person is in charge of this and this person. But then it just goes on and talks about the cross and Jesus' standard for the cross. And then it goes from talking about the cross to marriage, which is cool because that's similar to what Ephesians 5 does, is it relates marriage to the cross. And so it's so amazing how even now we have such a big role in each other's lives. Like we're playing out the cross through our marriage. Like that's amazing. But I love what it says here. I'm going to read it in the Amplified version because this translation has always helped me a lot. But it says, 1 Peter 1 verse 3, in the same way, you wives, be submissive to your own husbands, subordinate not as inferior, but out of respect for the responsibilities entrusted to husbands and their accountability to God, and so partnering with them, so that even if some do not obey the word of God, they may be won over to Christ without discussion, by the godly lives of their wives. When they see your modest and respectful behavior, together with your devotion and appreciation, love your husband, encourage him, and enjoy him as a blessing from God. Your adornment must not be merely external, with interweaving and elaborate knotting of the hair and wearing gold jewelry, or being superficially preoccupied with dressing in expensive clothes, but let it be the inner beauty, the hidden person of the heart, with the imperishable quality and unfading charm of a gentle and peaceful spirit, one that is calm and self-controlled, not over-anxious, but serene and spiritually mature, which is very precious in the sight of God. For in this way, in former times, the holy women who hoped in God used to adorn themselves, being submissive to their own husbands and adapting themselves to them, just as Sarah obeyed Abraham, following him and having regard for him as head of their house, calling him Lord. And you have become her daughters if you do what is right, without being frightened by any fear, that is, being respectful toward your husband, but not giving into intimidation, nor allowing yourself to be led into sin, nor to be harmed. In the same way, you husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, with great gentleness and tact, and with an intelligent regard for the marriage relationship, as with someone physically weaker, since she is a woman. Show her honor and respect as a fellow heir of the grace of life, so that your prayers will not be hindered or ineffective. Finally, all of you be like-minded, united in spirit, sympathetic, brotherly, kind-hearted, courteous and compassionate towards each other as members of one household, and humble in spirit, and never return evil for evil or insult for insult. Avoid scolding, berating, and any kind of abuse, but on the contrary, give a blessing. Pray for one another's well-being, contentment, and protection. For you have been called to this very purpose, that you might inherit a blessing from God that brings well-being, happiness, and protection. For the one who wants to enjoy life and see good days, good whether apparent or not, must keep his tongue free from evil and his lips from speaking guile, or treachery, or deceit. He must turn away from wickedness and do what is right. He must search for peace with God, with self, with others, and pursue it eagerly, actively, not merely desiring it. For the eyes of the Lord look favorably upon the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayer, but the face of the Lord is against those who practice evil. So I love all of this, but it first starts off talking about just the power we have as wives. Like, it says by our example, if we were to be married to a non-Christian spouse, that our example would be the thing to win him over to Christ. And I found that to be true even with being married to a Christian spouse. I've found that the way I treat Rob affects him more than the way anybody else treats him. He cares about my feedback on his sermon more than anybody else's. Like, whether, and I'm not always the most expressive person and all that, but he really looks to me for confidence and to feel believed in and to feel uplifted. And so that's been something I've had to learn how to be better at and how to deny myself in, because my influence, I have a big influence over him and how he even feels about himself. And I think of that too, we have a big role in our husbands' lives. And I remember I really struggled a lot with selfishness as a young Christian and as a young married. But I did not realize that until I was married. I didn't realize how selfish I was and how me constantly, Rob, having to orchestrate our lives around me and what I wanted, and me getting the first say in things. And because I'm a very strong person and can be, I can be a lot. And so there was a few times in our first year of marriage where I was just being me and doing myself. And then one day he would just kind of break down and be can I say something? And I'd be like, where is this coming from? But I had to learn, I don't even see how selfish I am. I don't see how I run the whole house around me. But that's why God gave me Rob. That's why God gave me marriage, is for me to see this about myself and have to change it and have to be more like Jesus. But I love here how the Amplified Bible just adds all these extra explanations of things, and like where it says to love your husband, it says encourage him, enjoy him as a blessing. I used to pray these things our first few years of marriage, like God help me to appreciate love, help me to admire him, help me to enjoy him, help me to, all of that. And I really found that helped my heart. There's no part of the Bible that like can't be helpful to our marriage. Even I think for me, like in the last section of this where it's talking about being humble, like never return insult for insult. It's funny how I can really focus on these things for like regular disciple relationships, but then like totally ignore them when it comes to my spouse. Like, he definitely gets the worst part of my sinful nature. But that's why it's such a higher calling to a cross of like, wow, if I'm going to be a loving Christian, like it's really, how I'm really going to know that is how I am in my house and if I treat my husband that way. And that's a high calling, but that's really what I believe all this scripture is saying, and I definitely struggled with a lot of anxiety my first few years of marriage, and I love that it talks about Sarah not giving way to fear. And it's interesting that it uplifts Sarah in the first place, because she was like super manipulative, like super like all the things we wouldn't think, but this shows like we all have hope. Like God used her as an example in some way, so she got it eventually, But I remember even my first marriage retreat, like the whole lunch break we spent crying in the car because I was so anxious, because the things I was hearing about, like, wait, disciple marriages, they do what? Like they struggle with what? Oh my gosh. And I just felt this weight of like, this is such a big deal. Like we can hurt each other so badly. And I don't know if anybody else, I'm just a big overthinker. But the Bible calls me to not give way to fear and to submit myself ultimately to God and trust him with my marriage and trust him with our characters.
Yeah, I mean, this passage has so much good stuff in it that I want to encourage you to like read through that chapter again over, a good quiet time and apply it to your marriage and what you bring to the marriage. And I do think, there's times to share, with the other person ways they maybe could grow in the relationship, but kind of like was said by Scott down in the room, if you're both making Jesus Lord, then the place you start is where do I need to put this into practice more? The more, I focus on me, I become who I need to be, which helps her become who she needs to be. And, with this passage, in terms of loving above all, one of the main places that this comes out is in our communication with each other. And I do want you just to think for a little bit about how is your communication as a couple. And, probably the three biggest things that you want to learn how to communicate on is how you make decisions, because that's a big thing. And I don't just mean like, where are we going to go for breakfast, but like, are we going to move or not? Should I take this different job? Should we go to your families or mine for the holidays this year? There's big decisions we need to make sometimes, and medium-sized decisions. And learning how to love above all in those conversations is really big. And so those first few years learning, how do we make decisions together? That's a really big thing. Another big area of conversation is sharing what you're feeling with each other. And it might be what she's feeling about other stuff, or what she's feeling about me, what I'm feeling about other stuff, or what I'm feeling about her. But in general, just learning how to communicate stuff that you're feeling about whatever. So that's a huge area of communication, is getting each other and what each other are feeling about something. And the third huge area of communication is conflict resolution. When one of you has hurt the other, when you've hurt each other, when you're stuck on something, how do you resolve conflict? And heavy conflict with your spouse is probably one of the worst things to experience, It's so tense, and it feels so crushing and like hopeless at the same time, and learning how do we part of why that is because you're still building trust with each other. Sure, you made vows and said I do, but you're kind of like, you're in it now. And so you're learning, like, are you really who you said you'd be? And you're building trust. And so learning how to communicate on decisions, on your feelings, and resolving conflict are so important for this foundational phase because you've got a life ahead of you of those three things. And so I think learning how to do that is so important. And in this passage, it's not like here's what you say, it's here's who you need to be. And that's more what it's about is these principles of how you love each other. And it says so much about it in here. I couldn't go through all of it, but you know, it says, you husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, with gentleness and tact, and in an intelligent regard. And you know, regular NIV translation would be to be considerate of her, to show her honor and respect. And so right there are some incredible communication principles that you're going to show understanding, gentleness, tact, intelligence, right? We don't always have all those things when we're in these conversations, right? But it's learning, all right, that's what I gotta be considerate and bringing those things to the table, right? And so, you know, I find that when I'm obeying these passages in my heart and in my character, then we're able to communicate well in these different areas. And, you know, I don't know exactly what it was, but in our first few years of marriage, there was a lot of bumps, a lot of conflict over a lot of these things. Me not understanding what she was feeling, her not understanding what I was feeling, and decisions that we needed to make, minor ones, bigger ones, conflict that we got into. And I think learning how to communicate in love through those things is a huge part of what makes our marriage so strong now, because we still get in bumps over things, but there's this like strong foundation of trust and this experience of confidence that we know how to resolve a conflict. And we know how to resolve conflict quickly.
Yeah.
So we get into something, and honestly, within one conversation at this point, it could typically be fully resolved. But that was unheard of the first few years of our marriage. It would be like the rest of the day we were trying to figure it out. It's like, oh, we made it even worse. Let's go back and pray and think about this. And okay, we're getting somewhere now. And I do think one thing we did have from day one was this conviction from Ephesians 4 that says, don't let the sun go down while you're still angry, and don't give the devil a foothold. And we had this conviction that no matter how rough it got, we are going to end the day in a peaceful place with each other. And maybe we didn't have all the answers figured out, maybe the decision wasn't figured out yet, but we were going to fall asleep saying, I love you, we're going to figure this out, I'm with you. You know, we were going to communicate things that helped us. You know, and there were some nights where I think we were even, still in bed trying to resolve something, still really stuck, hurt, not figuring it out.
Asleep for 30 seconds.
Yeah, roll over
That
and
makes
kind of
it
be
worse.
like, we'll figure it out tomorrow, I'm done. And then you're laying there and you just feel heavy, like this isn't okay. And forcing yourself to roll back over and go, I'm sorry. Can I understand better now? And like just the humility, bringing that to the table. We may not figure all this out right now, but could we end this in a love above all kind of place? And then sometimes the next day we both would be like, I'm so sorry, I was not thinking right last night. And sometimes you resolve emotionally, and then the next day you resolve the content of whatever the conflict was about. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that was a huge principle. Don't give the devil a foothold. I don't want a marriage where there's stuff built up for days, weeks, months. Like, we gotta resolve this. We gotta get through this.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
I love all that Rob was saying, and I think in verse 4 here, I never understood what a gentle and quiet spirit means. That's why I like how this translation kind of expands on it, but it talks about being calm, self-controlled, not over-anxious, serene, and spiritually mature. And that's what I found that conflict really got to with me, is that I was spiritually immature in a lot of ways. Like Rob was, you're not supposed to say always in marriage, but I think he was always the first to say sorry.
You could say it in a positive way.
That's true, yeah.
You're always beautiful, you're always
Yeah.
loving.
And you're not supposed to say you
You
always do that, or you always, you're always like this. But I really think he was always the first to apologize. Like, he was just way more humble. And the thing that always was brought out in me in conflict was a lack of calmness. Like, I would get overly emotional, not be self-controlled. I was terrible with my tongue. And that was one of the first things I had to get a lot of help with too. I went back on some of my quiet time notes my first few years of marriage, and most of them were Bible studies on the tongue. which there are so many in the Bible, like all of James 3, Proverbs, it talks about like a nagging wife, different, I don't know, there's all these different, like it talks a lot about wives and their tongues, but that, I had to do Bible study upon Bible study of that, because I was naturally not good with my tongue and all that, and it is encouraging, like now when we talk to young couples and remember all that and think, like, oh wow, yeah, like there's growth, and so that, we're just saying that to give you guys hope, like, I always felt like, just very insecure those first few years of marriage, or like, is this gonna get better, will we grow past this? And you can, with God and through the scriptures. The scriptures, I believe, are magic, and they teach us how to be better, and they make our marriages better.
One last quick thing on this, and then you can talk about it for a minute, is kind of this balance of not sweating the small things, but also not sweeping things under the rug. And I think that is something to figure out a balance of. In Proverbs 19, verse 11, it says, good sense makes one slow to anger. So it's basically saying, like, good sense, like, know what's worth getting angry about and what's worth not getting angry about. And it says it's to one's glory to overlook an offense. And so there are times where it's good to not sweat the small things. But then in Song of Songs 2:15, it says, catch all the foxes, those little foxes, before they ruin the vineyard of love. And, you know, there's also these ideas of, like, that a little yeast could work through the whole batch of dough. There's stuff that's little, but if it's not, these little foxes aren't dealt with, they could ruin the vineyard of love. And so figuring out what's like a petty thing that I just need to, like, overlook this offense, like just truly let it go. And don't say you're letting it go, but then hold on to it a little bit. Like, you really got to just let it go. But then what are things that are like, oh, you know, this keeps happening and I keep feeling this way about it. And it might seem dumb, it might seem little, but little foxes can ruin the vineyard, you know? So I gotta share this. I gotta talk to you about this. This has been bothering me. And hopefully you've done that earlier on, not after a year or 2 years or whatever it was. And, you know, I've seen this in my life. I've seen the harm caused by nitpicking small things. And where I saw this was in the brother's house that I lived in before I got married. I lived in a house with like 5 or 6 other, you know, brothers, disciples in the church. And I am a very opinionated, like, I know the best way to do things minded kind of person. And so when I see other people in the house doing things not the best way to do them, dumb stuff, how to scramble their eggs, how to put stuff in the dishwasher. I just was always expressing my better way of doing these things. And I saw it ruin a couple of those friendships, you know, that it was like I was this stressful presence in the room, like, hey, you know, it's better if you do it like this, or hey, it's really, you should do it like this. And, you know, and I remember leaving that house feeling regret of, like, you should have just let a lot of that stuff go. Like, it's not a big deal, you know, if they left this in the bathroom, or the floor was wet every time, or, you know, like, there's some stuff, it's like, they're messy, okay, you know, you're not, okay, you know. So there's certain things that I saw, and I knew because of that experience, I'm not gonna make a big deal about little stuff that ultimately doesn't matter. I'm gonna let it go. And maybe I've not done that perfectly, but that's been a mindset for me, is like, she does put stuff, you know, in places different than me, that's okay. If we, you know, whatever, I'm my way about that stuff, she does it differently, I'm not gonna sweat the small things. But then I saw the harm in our marriage of me, especially in the first year of marriage, stuffing a bunch of small things that I was feeling stuff about, but I just tried to go like, oh, it's fine, it's not a big deal, oh, it's all right, oh, it's, you know. And then at our first marriage retreat, we heard a class on whatever, and we're back in the room, and I just like vomit all of this built up hurt that I felt, that she fortunately responded very lovingly and graciously with, but that was a lot on her to hear. I've been feeling all this stuff for like a year and didn't say it, you know? And so I'm, you know, and again, it was nothing crazy, but it was the things like the disrespect I was feeling, or the, you know, the intensity of how she would express things. And I just was trying to like love her by taking it, but I wasn't really loving her because it was building up in me, and then it all came out. And so, you know, above all, love one another, and communication is not sweating the small things. It's to one's glory to overlook an offense. But then also knowing, hey, we got to catch these little foxes, and learning with these principles, how do I share with you and you respond spiritually as we talk about these things together. So love above all, more than everything else you're trying to figure out or you're stuck on or you're disagreeing on, love above all. And so let's take just a few minutes here and you can talk with each other and then we'll close out with one last quick thought.
Yeah.
So,
and some practicals of how we have those conversations with, we learned to be like, hey, I just need to bring this up from my heart. I just need to be open with you. I'm feeling this, but I know this is not your intention. But I feel like if I don't bring it up, I'm going to keep thinking about it. And so I don't want Satan to have a foothold from here. Like that would receive a lot better of a response than, here it is, this is what you do.
You're doing this,
Yeah.
versus can I share how I've been feeling,
Yeah.
And so that would help a lot. So yeah, maybe talk with each other for a few minutes about this point, and then we'll close out with one last short thought here. Let's come back together, and we'll just have one last quick thought here, and whatever you're talking about right now, I'm sure it'll be really good stuff to go back to and to flush out. Finishing that conversation, the last quick thing we want to leave you with here to build a strong foundation is to be learners for life. To be learners for life. And obviously, you learned a lot about each other when you were dating, but in these first few years of marriage, you're learning a whole lot more. But you want to keep being learners. Learners from the Bible, but also learners of and from each other. Proverbs 13 verse 20 says, "Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm." And then Proverbs 15 verse 6 says, "The house of the righteous contains great treasure, but the income of the wicked brings ruin." And so when I think about these two proverbs together, what I get from them is that if you walk with the wise, if you try to learn, then you grow wise yourself. And that the house, the home, the marriage of a righteous person, someone who's learned to be wise and to be righteous, what they have in their marriage and their home and their life is great treasure.
Yeah.
Right? What you bring into your home, and not treasure of like literal, wealth and money, but the treasures of joy, of peace, of love, of unity, of a strong marriage. That through gaining wisdom, being learners, learning to be righteous in your marriage, you do have this house, this marriage that's filled with great treasure. Right? And people see that in your marriage and in your home. And so just a few quick practicals on being learners for life, learners together, is to keep studying the other person. Like be a learner of your spouse. Right? That we're not staying the same. We're all changing, going through new things, learning new things. Like keep learning your spouse, keep getting to know them better and hearing them and what's going on in their world, in their life, in their heart. And be the person who knows your spouse better than anybody else. That you really know each other better than anyone else does. I know a couple things that we've learned to do, especially in some of these, conversations we were just talking about, that helps us be learners of each other is, say I hurt Chelsea's feelings in some way or whatever, and we're talking through that, and I've heard her express what she's been thinking, for me to say back to her what I'm hearing her say, right? So what I'm hearing you say is that it really offended you when I said blank because it made you feel X, Y, and Z, right? And so me saying it back shows that I really heard her, and it gives her an opportunity to go, that's close, but it was actually more this that I was feeling, and to really, and I'm asking that because I really want to make sure, do I understand what I did and why you felt what you felt? Like you're really trying to learn and understand the other person. And another really good question at the end of those conversations is, so the next time this comes up, or the next time we need to make a decision like this, or the next time you're feeling that way, what would you want me to do? What would help next time? Right? And that you're learning from them, what would help you more? Right? So I know what I did wrong, but what next time would help you even more? Just questions that you're not just trying to get to the other side of the situation, you're trying to learn the other person. Why do they feel what they feel? Yeah, you want to do better next time. Like you're trying to keep learning and growing. Like Chelsea said with the tongue passages, you're learning from each other, but you also want to keep learning from God. Like going to God in prayer and studying things out in the Bible. The Bible has so many helpful things to say for us as husbands, wives, and how to be strong in our marriages. Every year I try to read, one book on marriage one book on marriage. Sometimes we read it together, talk about what we're learning from it. We're trying to keep investing in our relationship because it's the most important relationship and one of the most important parts of our lives. And the last practical I'll say on this, and she'll give a few quick thoughts, is don't learn alone. Right? He who walks with the wise grows wise. Have people in your life who are spiritual people, wise people with good marriages who know your relationship inside and out. You've got to have one couple at least that you respect their marriage spiritually, that you feel enough trust and openness with to just get help with whatever's going on in your marriage about. Because there's going to be stuff, and you've got to have people who you're okay with hearing the most embarrassing thing for them to hear that you said to your spouse, right? Maybe something where you're like, I can't believe they're going to know that I said that, But just that openness with people who really know you and can help you work through all those different challenges together. We've had to get open with, and get help from others with things on our scheduling and with our budget and spending, with insecurity or challenges around intimacy, with stuffed feelings, with all sorts of things that aren't like, oh, this is normal stuff to talk to people about. Yeah. But you find people you trust who you just know this is who we're going to learn from and grow wise so that our home is filled with treasures and doing life with them.
Yeah, no, I hope this all just helped you guys feel like just to normalize the learning curve, that it is such a learning curve, but God's got us, and as long as we keep doing it God's way, I think we'll end up in good places. I hope. 12 years in, I feel like it's pretty good.
No, it's really good.
Yeah.
I feel like it keeps getting better. I'm so grateful for getting to do marriage God's way. So thanks for being here. I hope this was helpful. Let's live it up. Let's love above all. You guys are dismissed.